Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's a moment, and I think you know exactly the one I mean. When you're standing in your own kitchen, maybe it's early morning, the coffee's just started to brew, and the house is quiet. And instead of feeling relief, you feel this strange hollow ache. Not sadness, exactly not grief. Just this low, persistent hum of something that never quite got resolved. Something you've been carrying for so long. You've almost forgotten what it feels like not to carry it. You've raised people. You've held families together with your bare hands. You've been the one everyone called, the steady voice, the warm arms, the practical wisdom. You've built a life that, from the outside, looks like the very definition of enough. And yet, there's still that whisper. The one that surfaces when the room gets too quiet. Is this it? Did I miss something? Why can't I just rest? I want to talk to you about that whisper. Not to silence it, but to finally understand what it's been trying to tell you all along. Because here's what I've come to believe. After years of sitting with women in that exact ache, and after sitting with it myself, inner peace is not what we were told it was. We were handed this image, weren't we? Some version of serenity that looked like a woman in white linen sitting cross-legged by still water, eyes closed, completely untroubled. No phone ringing. No grandchild needing pickup. No adult child in crisis. No old wound resurfacing at 3 a.m. That image, it was never for us. It was never even real. Real inner peace. The kind that's actually available to a woman who has lived, who has lost things, who carries the weight of real history in her body. It doesn't look like stillness. It looks like something far more honest, far more earned. It looks like you, standing in that kitchen, hearing the whisper, and instead of pushing it away or drowning it in business, finally sitting down with it. Finally saying, all right, I'm here. What have you been trying to tell me? I want you to think about something for a moment. How many years have you spent taking care of the emotional interior of other people's lives? Tending to their fears, soothing their anxieties, making space for their grief, their anger, their uncertainty. Now, and answer this honestly, when was the last time someone tended to yours? When was the last time you tended to yours? For so many women in the second half of life, there's this unspoken truth that nobody names out loud. We became so fluent in the language of caring for others that we became strangers to our own inner world. We moved so fast, for so long, that we outpaced the part of ourselves that needed quiet, needed reflection, needed to be known. And then the pace slows. The children leave. The career winds down. The roles we built our identity around start to shift. And suddenly there's space. And instead of it feeling like freedom, it feels like exposure. Like all the noise we stayed so busy creating was actually insulation. Protection from something we didn't want to face. That's not a character flaw. That's not weakness. That is what happens when a woman spends decades giving everything she had to everyone around her. And nobody, including herself, ever told her that she was allowed to have an inside life too. This is where the real work begins. Not the work of fixing something broken, the work of returning. Coming home to a self that's been waiting, patiently, quietly, the way a garden waits through a long winter. Not dead, just dormant. Just waiting for someone to finally come back and tend to it. Inner peace, for us, at this stage of life, starts with a single act of radical honesty. Not the performative honesty we're good at. The no, I'm fine, really kind. The real kind. The kind where you sit down somewhere private and you ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Not what I should be feeling. Not what I'm grateful for. What is actually alive in me in this moment? That question is a door. And most of us have been standing in front of it for years, hand on the knob, not quite turning it. I want to turn it with you. Because on the other side of that door is not the darkness you feared. It's not the unraveling you've been protecting yourself from. On the other side of that door is something you've been hungry for without having a name for it. It's yourself. The full version. The complicated feeling, wondering, still becoming version of you. And she is worth every bit of the journey it takes to find her. Let me ask you something that might feel a little uncomfortable. Think about the last time someone hurt you, really hurt you. Not a stranger. Someone close. A husband, maybe. A child. A sister. A friend you trusted with the tender parts of yourself. Think about how that wound landed. The shock of it. The way it rearranged something inside you. Now tell me, did you ever fully grieve it? Or did you do what most of us do? Did you give it a few days, maybe a few weeks, and then quietly fold it up like a letter you couldn't bring yourself to throw away and tuck it somewhere deep? Somewhere it wouldn't interfere with breakfast, with carpools, with keeping the peace, with being the person everyone needed you to be? Most of us have an entire archive of those folded letters. Decades of them. And we wonder why we can't find rest. Here's something I've never heard said plainly enough, so I want to say it plainly now. The weight we carry isn't always made of big, dramatic traumas. Sometimes, often actually, it's made of something quieter and more insidious. It's made of the accumulation. The 1,000 small moments where you swallowed something that deserved to be spoken. Where you smiled when you needed to cry. Where you made yourself smaller to make someone else more comfortable. Where you gave the last of your energy to someone who never thought to ask whether you had any left. Each one of those moments on its own felt manageable, survivable, fine. But they don't disappear, they settle. They layer, and over time, they become the low hum. That persistent, background ache that you've learned to live around, but have never quite been able to live without. Psychologists have a term for this, we call it emotional suppression. But I think that term is too clinical, too detached for what this actually feels like. What it actually feels like is this: you've been a cup that's been poured from, and poured from, and poured from. And somewhere along the way, you started believing that having needs of your own was a kind of selfishness you couldn't afford. Can you hear how absurd that is when I say it out loud like that? And yet, doesn't it feel exactly true? I want to talk about guilt for a moment. Because for women of our generation, guilt is not just an emotion. It's an operating system. It runs quietly in the background of almost every decision. Should I spend this money on myself? Is it selfish to want more time alone? Am I a bad mother, a bad wife, a bad daughter if I say no? If I choose me? We were handed this guilt before we were old enough to question it. It came wrapped in the language of love and virtue and family and sacrifice. And because it arrived alongside things we genuinely valued, we never stopped to separate the two. We took the guilt as part of the package. But here's what I need you to hear. Guilt, when it's chronic, when it's ambient, when it has nothing specific to attach itself to anymore, but still hums along anyway. That kind of guilt is not a moral compass. It's a habit. A very old, very tired habit that was handed to you by people who were also carrying it, who got it from people who carried it before them. You didn't earn it. You inherited it. And inheritance, unlike debt, can be returned. There's another weight I want to name, one that's even harder to talk about: regret. Not the sharp, specific regret of a single decision. Those are actually easier to hold because they have edges, they have a shape. I mean the diffuse, foggy kind. The regret that surfaces as a question you can't quite finish asking yourself. What if I had followed that dream? Spoken up sooner? Left earlier? Or stayed longer? Chosen differently, back when differently was still possible. For women in this chapter of life, this particular weight can feel enormous. Because the cultural story we were told, that our worth was in our roles, our relationships, our sacrifices. That story is starting to fray. And as it frays, a terrifying question can slip through the cracks: was it enough? Was I enough? Did my life mean what I needed it to mean? I won't offer you a tidy answer to that. Tidy answers to sacred questions are an insult. But I will offer you this: the fact that you're asking it, the fact that it matters to you, says something profound about who you are. People who never stop to question whether their lives were meaningful are not the ones sitting with this ache. You are asking because you are awake, because some part of you refused to go all the way numb, even when numb would have been easier. That wakefulness, that is not your wound. That is your greatest strength. Now, here's where I want to gently, but honestly challenge something. A lot of us, when we start to feel these weights, the grief, the guilt, the regret, the quiet longing, we do one of two things. We either bury it faster, distract ourselves more aggressively, stay busier than ever, or we start to identify with it. We let the weight become our personality. We wear our suffering like a coat we've had so long, we've forgotten we have the option to take it off. Neither of those is healing. One is avoidance. The other is attachment, real healing. And I mean the kind that actually produces something like peace, requires a third path. It requires you to do something that takes tremendous courage. You have to look at what you're carrying without flinching away from it, and without letting it become the whole story of who you are. You are not your unlived dreams. You are not your unmade apologies. You are not the ways you were failed, or the ways you may have failed others. You are not the years that felt wasted or the feelings that were never witnessed. You are the one who carried all of that and still woke up this morning, still made the coffee, still wondered if peace was possible. That person, the one still wondering, she is still so alive, and she deserves to finally set some of this down. There's a word I want to reclaim for you today. Sanctuary. Not a building. Not a retreat center you have to drive 3 hours to reach. Not something you have to earn by first becoming calmer or more spiritual or less complicated than you currently are. A sanctuary is simply a place, or a practice, or a moment, where you are safe to be exactly who you are. All of it. The tender parts and the tired parts. The proud parts and the ashamed parts. The woman you've become and the girl you used to be, who, by the way, is still in there. Still watching. Still hoping someone will finally pay attention to her. Here's the truth that took me a long time to accept. Nobody's going to build that sanctuary for you. Not your children, even the loving ones. Not your partner, even the devoted ones. Not a therapist, not a best friend. Not a grandchild's laugh. As healing as all of those things genuinely are. The sanctuary I'm talking about has to be built from the inside. And the building of it begins with a single, deceptively simple decision. The decision to matter to yourself. I know how that sounds. I know some part of you just bristled a little. Maybe even rolled your eyes. Not out of dismissal, but out of a very specific kind of exhaustion. The exhaustion of having heard some version of put yourself first, your entire adult life, offered cheerfully by people who clearly didn't understand the logistics of your actual life. So let me be careful here. I'm not talking about bubble baths and scented candles, though Lord knows there's nothing wrong with either. I'm not talking about a weekend away or a new morning routine, though those things can matter. I'm talking about something that happens before any of that. Something internal. Something that doesn't require a single changed circumstance. I'm talking about the moment you decide, quietly, firmly, without announcing it to anyone, that your inner life is worth tending. That your feelings are data, not drama. That your needs are real, not negotiable. That the quiet whispers inside you are not symptoms of ingratitude or weakness, but invitations. Invitations to finally show up for the one person who has been waiting the longest. The turning, when it comes, rarely looks dramatic. It doesn't arrive with music or revelation. It's not usually a breakdown or a lightning bolt. For most women I've known, and for myself, the turning looks like a very ordinary moment that somehow lands differently than ordinary moments usually do. Maybe you're saying yes to something you've always said no to out of habit. Maybe you're in the middle of apologizing for something that doesn't actually require an apology, and you just stop mid-sentence, and something in you goes quiet in a way that feels, for once, like choice rather than suppression. Maybe you look in the mirror one morning, not critically, just looking, and something shifts. Some ancient argument you've been having with your own reflection just loses steam, not because you've resolved it, but because you've finally gotten too tired to keep fighting yourself. And in that tiredness, surprisingly, is the first taste of grace. These small turnings are the real ones. They don't announce themselves, but they accumulate, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, you find yourself living from a slightly different center of gravity. Let me talk about boundaries for a moment, but not the way that word usually gets used, like a fortress wall you build to keep dangerous people out. I want to talk about boundaries as an act of self-knowledge, as the natural expression of finally understanding what you value, what you need, and what you're willing to tend. Because here's what I've noticed: women who struggle most with inner peace often aren't struggling because their lives are too hard. They're struggling because their lives are full of things that don't actually align with who they are anymore. Old commitments made by an earlier version of themselves. Relationships maintained out of obligation rather than genuine nourishment. Roles kept in place by momentum rather than meaning. At 55, 60, 65, 70, you are not the same woman who made most of those original agreements. You've been through things. You've survived things. You've outlasted versions of yourself you thought would be permanent. You are allowed to renegotiate. You are allowed to look at your one precious life and ask, with full seriousness, does this still fit? Does this still feed me? Is this still mine, or am I maintaining it for someone else's comfort? Those questions aren't selfish. They are sane. They are the sanest questions a woman at this stage of life can ask herself. Now, I want to acknowledge something because it would be dishonest not to. The turning is not painless. When you begin to choose yourself, when you start to honor your own needs with the same consistency you've always honored everyone else's, there will be people in your life who don't like it. Some will be confused. Some will be quietly threatened. Some will, without realizing it, try to pull you back toward the version of you that was easier for them to be around. The one who never asked for anything. The one whose needs were conveniently invisible. This is not because they are bad people. It's because systems, even family systems, even loving ones, resist change. The role you've played has worked for everyone around you. Changing it requires everyone to adjust. An adjustment, for most people, is uncomfortable. But here's what I want you to hold on to in those moments. Someone else's discomfort with your growth is not evidence that your growth is wrong. Say that again. Let it settle. Someone else's discomfort with your growth is not evidence that your growth is wrong. You have spent enough years shrinking to fit spaces that were too small for you. The turning is the moment you decide, not loudly, not cruelly, but firmly, to stop doing that. And here's the unexpected gift in all of it. When you stop abandoning yourself, something remarkable happens to your relationships. Not all of them. Some will fall away, and that grief is real and deserves its own tenderness. But the ones that are rooted in something genuine, they deepen. They breathe easier. Because you finally show up in them as a whole person, not a performance. Not a function, not a role. You show up as you. And the people who are meant to love you will love that version more than any version you ever carefully curated for their approval. The sanctuary you build inside yourself doesn't wall you off from love. It makes you finally fully available to it. I want to paint you a picture. Not the Lennon and Stillwater version. Not the version they put on the covers of wellness magazines, all golden light and effortless smiles. I want to paint you the real one. The one that's actually available to you. The one that, if I'm honest, is so much more beautiful than the manufactured kind, precisely because it has texture. Because it has history. Because it was earned. Picture a woman who still has hard days. Who still gets her feelings hurt. Still carries the occasional sleepless night. Still sometimes finds herself standing at the kitchen window with that old familiar ache. She hasn't transcended any of that. Life didn't get simpler or cleaner or free of complication. But something is different. When the hard moment comes, she doesn't become it. She feels it, fully, honestly, and she stays herself inside of it. There's a thread she can follow back to her own center, even in the middle of the storm. A quiet place inside her that the storm touches, but doesn't destroy. That is inner peace, not the absence of difficulty. The presence of yourself within it. And it is absolutely available to you. Let's talk about what coming home to yourself actually looks like in the texture of a real day. Because I think we've spent enough time in the abstract. You deserve something you can actually use. It starts genuinely with morning. Not because mornings are magical, but because the first few minutes of your day are the most honest. Before the roles kick in. Before the phone lights up with everyone else's needs and agendas. Before you've had a chance to remember all the things you're supposed to be. There's a small window, right at the beginning, sometimes only 5 or 10 minutes, where you're just you, soft, unperformed, present. What do you do with that window? Most of us hand it over immediately. We reach for the phone, we start the mental list. We begin the long day of being useful before we've taken a single breath for ourselves. What if you didn't? What if, just for those first few minutes, you let yourself arrive? Let yourself feel what you actually feel. Think what you actually think. Notice what your body is carrying before the day asks anything of it. Not meditation, necessarily. Not journaling, if that's not your thing. Just witnessing. Being present to your own interior the way you've always been present to everyone else's. That practice, 5 minutes of honest self-witnessing, is not small. Over time, it is revolutionary. There's something else I want to offer you, and it's perhaps the most countercultural thing I'll say today. Slowness is not laziness. Stillness is not emptiness. Rest is not something you have to earn. I mean this physiologically, psychologically, spiritually, at every level. The nervous system of a woman who has spent decades in high, alert caregiving mode doesn't just relax because the circumstances have changed. It has to be taught that slowness is safe, that nothing terrible will happen if she stops moving, that the world will not fall apart if she sits in the garden for an hour with no productive outcome to show for it. This teaching takes time. It takes patience with yourself. And it takes the radical willingness to tolerate, for a little while, the guilt and restlessness that come up when you first start practicing it, without immediately running back to business to make those feelings stop. The guilt will come. Let it. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It means you're doing something new. Something your nervous system hasn't learned to trust yet. But it will learn. The human body is extraordinary in its capacity to recalibrate towards safety when safety is consistently offered. Offer yourself safety, again and again and again. That is the whole practice. Now I want to speak to something that lives very deep, something most women in this chapter of life carry but rarely say out loud. The fear that it's too late, that the window for becoming who you were meant to be has somehow closed. That peace, real peace, is something you had to arrive at younger, before all the years and compromises and accumulated grief. That maybe you missed it. That maybe it's just not for you. I want to sit with you in that fear for a moment, because it deserves respect. It's real. I felt it myself. And I've sat across from enough extraordinary women who carried it to know that it visits almost all of us at some point. But here's what I also know, not from theory, but from watching it happen over and over. In real lives, the second half of life is not the closing of a door. It is, for many women, the first time they've had the conditions necessary for genuine inner peace. Because genuine inner peace requires things that youth rarely provides. It requires perspective. It requires having been through enough to know what truly matters and what never did. It requires the particular kind of courage that only comes from having already survived things you weren't sure you'd survive. You have all of those things. You've been building toward this capacity your entire life, even when it didn't feel like building. Even when it felt like barely keeping your head above water. The river that shaped you, that wore away everything that wasn't essentially you, that river was doing its work. And what it's revealed underneath all the layers, all the roles, all the performance and protection and sacrifice, is someone worth knowing. Let me leave you with something I think about often. There's a concept in certain wisdom traditions of the elder woman. Not elderly in the diminished sense our culture misses that word, but elder in the true sense. The woman who has lived enough to carry genuine wisdom. Who has been broken open enough times to have real compassion. Who has earned through the full living of her life a kind of authority that can't be faked or rushed. Our culture doesn't honor her the way it should. It's obsessed with the beginning of the story and largely indifferent to the chapters that contain the most substance. That is the culture's profound loss, not yours. Because you don't need cultural permission to step into that fullness. You don't need anyone to formally recognize what this season of your life contains. You can simply choose it. Choose the wisdom over the wound. Choose the depth over the performance. Choose the quiet authority of a woman who knows herself over the exhausting labor of a woman who is still trying to earn her place. You have already earned your place. You earned it 10,000 times over. The question now is only whether you'll claim it. Inner peace, I've come to believe, is not a destination. It's not a state you achieve and then get to keep undisturbed forever. It's more like a practice of returning, of noticing when you've drifted away from yourself, into anxiety, into old patterns, into the weight of other people's emotional weather, and finding your way back to your breath, back to your body, back to the quiet knowing at your center that has always been there, even when life was too loud to hear it. You'll drift. That's not failure. That's human. The peace is not in never drifting. The peace is in knowing you can always find your way home. And home, the real one, the one that doesn't depend on any circumstance or any person or any outcome going the right way. That home has always been inside you. It's been waiting with extraordinary patience through every season you've lived. Through everything you've carried, everything you've lost, everything you've given, everything you've become. It's still there, quiet, steady, completely yours. All you have to do, all you have ever had to do, is turn toward it. Come home, love. You've been away long enough.